Okay. So we've already started discussing something, but I'll bring everyone up to speed. I'm going to go into text 3 in a minute. The Yom Kippur is a day of rebirth, of restarting our year, revisiting who we are, where we're going, how we are vis-a-vis ourselves and our inner values vis-a-vis God. And so it's fresh start is very important. A fresh start isn't just about just wiping the slate clean. It's really meant to be a time for introspection and recalibrating ourselves for the year, and recalibrating our relationship with God, relationship with our best selves. So in Kippur, there's a service, which if you look in the Torah, it doesn't indicate this. There's a lot of things going on in the temple, and a lot of it is the inner dynamics are either hinted at or implied of the way we speak about them much more today, where we come to services, we have a liturgy, it gives us food for thought. In the olden days, in the times of the temple, it was very temple service focused, but all of those services had very important messages for our own psycho-spiritual journey. One of the elements that you'll find mentioned in the service, in the Musaf on Yom Kippur, in a way is similar to a service that's done every single day. And it's on our liturgy there. Every morning and every afternoon, as part of our liturgy, we revisit the offerings that were done in the temple. And one of them is the incense. There were 11 different ingredients brought together, produced a nice smell. There was the lessons from the ingredients as they were brought. We're not getting into that right now. And they would be burned, and there would be a sweet smell in the temple. So that's what God says. It's not that God needs the perfume, but there was something important about it. In the language, as we're going to see, it's seen as very, very powerful and very important to God. Every single day, we bring incense twice a day. And as it will be referenced here, but while I'm talking about it, I want to highlight it. In the Torah, there's an episode where the Jews are struck by a plague, and Aaron runs and brings the incense to the people, and the plague stops. It's seen as a very powerful force for good and for healing. So that's every day. Now, Yom Kippur, a difference we see between Yom Kippur and the every day, if we look a little, it's not very highlighted in the Torah, but if you're looking at the texts describing the daily incense and the Yom Kippur incense, there is something that you will notice. Burning the incense on a Sunday in September is burning and it's holy, but when you're burning something, you probably produce smoke. What if you don't produce smoke? Who cares? The main thing is that you're burning it. On Yom Kippur, the smoke takes up an essential part of the narrative, or at least an important part of the narrative, where the smoke is seen as is mentioned. In other words, smoke is an important part of the package that's producing smoke. And not only that, it says that smoke will go above the ark. The high priest is in the Holy of Holies. One day a year is going to go into the Holy of Holies because it's such a special day. And the smoke is on top of the ark. It's hovering over it. And the language of the Torah is that in that cloud of smoke, God says, I will be seen above the ark. So it's obviously a very important medium for the connection between us and God, to the extent that the Jewish law derives from the way the language of the Torah, that this was a very, very important with liability, severe liability to the Kohen, if there was not smoke in the incense of Yom Kippur. There's no incense on a Sunday, because there would have been on an average Sunday, there would have been incense morning and afternoon. So no smoke, no smoke. In Kippur, there needs to be the smoke. It's central. So we want to get into what is the smoke idea? Again, I'm sorry that for whatever reason I this wasn't working well before, or I didn't go into the right place, or whatever it is. Okay. Now, Maimonides, in his Guide for the Perplexed, has a very specific bent. In the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides is trying to find, and it says that he wants to show rational, very humanly rational reasons for all the mitzvahs. It's not that that's Maimonides. It's pretty clear wasn't his position. He saw tremendous power of the supernatural. He was addressing this to people who were hung up on rationality. He said, "You need the rational. I'll explain that to you." So he gives a rational reason for the incense, and it's pretty simple. It says, text 3: many animals were slaughtered every day in the temple. Their meat was cut there, and their innards were rinsed. Naturally, if nothing had been done to offset that, smell would have been like a butcher shop. Right? Very simple. This isn't very Kabbalistic. To prevent that, we were commanded to bring the Ketoret, the incense offering, twice a day, once in the morning, once again in the afternoon. Why? Because you got to fumigate the place. This filled the air with a sweet fragrance. Even the clothes of those who served they would absorb the scent. The sages would say that in Jericho, far from Jerusalem, you could smell the Ketoret. It was a great smell. He says it was simply that. It's like an air purifier. Or I don't know if it's purifying, but there's a better word for it. But it's bringing a beautiful odor to a room that would have otherwise smelled not well. If it had smelled bad, it would have created the opposite feeling. Person is naturally drawn to good smells and feels relaxed around them, but bad smell makes us shrink back and want to. Okay, so that's Maimonides. A very pedestrian, simple explanation. A lot of the rabbis of his contemporaries say, "Whoa, that could have been a nice byproduct, but don't reduce the idea of Ketorah to just the thing you hang in your car for the fragrance." Because we see from Torah, from other Torah sources, it was a powerful spiritual exercise. Let's look at text 4. This is from the Zohar, and this is on page 180. When the Zohar is a fundamental textbook of Kabbalah, it says, when someone would walk through the temple and smell the scent of the incense rising with its column of smoke, their heart would settle, their mind would clear, joy would well up within them as they felt drawn to serve their Creator. The impurities of the Yetzer Hara, which means it's our weaker inclination, our pulls towards things that are not good for us spiritually and psychospiritually, would fall away, and they would be left with one pure desire to connect with our Father in heaven. That's the power of the incense. It breaks the hold of negativity, our internal weaker pulls. It breaks the hold, because sometimes we're a slave to that on every side. There's nothing in the world that can break the forces of evil the way incense can. There's nothing more beloved before God than the incense. It can cancel out witchcraft. I don't think the translation is not. I wouldn't say witchcraft. I would say of negative spirits that are in our psyche or that we're affected by. Remove negative forces from the home. This is a spiritual law, fixed and unchanging before God. Anyone who looks into and reads the passages in the Torah describing the incense every day will be protected from harm, bad thoughts, harsh judgment, and from illness. That whole day, no negative force will be able to harm them, but they must focus with intention. Rabbi Shimon said, if people only knew how precious the incense is before God, they would take each and every ingredient and make it into a crown for their heads like a golden diadem. Anyone who involves themselves with it, who studies the passages in the Torah describing the incense daily with intent, has a portion in this world and the next. Illness will leave him or her. They will be saved from all forms of judgment in this world, from dark spiritual forces, from the judgment of Gehenna, of purgatory, and from oppressive earthly governments. Okay, so he says it's a really powerful thing. It's not just about bringing a sweet smell to a butcher shop. Let's take it a little bit further. Text 5 from the Medrash. God said, of all the offerings that you bring, none is as beloved to me as the incense. That's a big deal. There are a lot of offerings. They're all important. He's saying the incense it has a special place. This is the rabbis of the Talmud telling us this. And you can understand why. Every other offering is brought to meet some need of the Jewish people. Why do people come with an offering? Because there's a personal need. They got to discharge here. How so? Sin offering is brought for a sin. I did something wrong. I say, oops, sorry, God. But in the times of the temple, I brought an offering. The asham is a guilt offering, the same thing, too. The olah, the burnt offering, comes to atone for improper thoughts. The shlamim, which is called like a peace offering in English, perhaps, are brought for atonement as well, for failing to fulfill a positive mitzvah. There was always some deficiency going on in someone's life that brought them to bring an offering. What about the incense? It isn't brought because of sin, guilt, or wrongdoing. It's brought for joy. It's brought to increase the beauty of life and the beauty of the connection between us and God. As the verse says, oil and incense make the heart rejoice. It's uplifting. That was the point. So sure we have the right. It's text 5 in the Medrash. Okay. The incense is beloved to God. Just look at King David. He longed to offer the incense. As it says, I will bring you burnt offerings of fat animals with the incense of rams. I will prepare bulls with goats. He mentioned, I want to be able to bring the incense. And see how powerful it is. When there was a deadly plague, it was incense that stopped it. When Moses told Aaron, take the fire pan, put the fire from the altar on it, and place incense, Aaron ran into the crowd, and by then the plague had already stopped. That's what I mentioned before. The Torah, just from its narratives of the stories, makes it clear that the incense has some very special power. So most of the rabbis don't agree with Maimonides' thought, and the truth is, we don't think Maimonides even agreed with it. He was making a rational case, and it says you can understand that this is true at a certain level. If that makes you happy, welcome to Judaism. But it's just an elementary. It's like someone saying, it's great to keep Shabbat, to have a Friday night meal, because it brings people together. That's true. Is that the reason we have a Shabbat meal? What happens if I'm myself? I still have a Shabbat meal because it's a mitzvah. But it depends, if I'm in marketing. If I'm marketing the beauty of Shabbat and getting together and turning off the smartphones on Friday, I can make a case for Friday night, but it's not the case. It's a case that's a good entry point. So Maimonides also was coming from a good entry point. We can call it that, for the rational, or the rationally obsessed. Text 6. This is from someone shortly after Maimonides' time, and he's a great, very well-respected person, authority, and he disagrees with it, but he says Maimonides was forced to explain it the way because of how he approached the mitzvahs. He's in a book that's saying, I'm going to rationalize mitzvahs to you, so he's got to make it rational. But God forbid to suggest that the core idea behind the incense, something so central that the Torah mandates spiritual excision for anyone who imitates this exact formula, could be based on such a weak reason. It was definitely, it was a powerful spiritual exercise. It wasn't just about bringing a good odor to a butcher shop. So now that we've established that mainstream Jewish thought is this, it was a very powerful exercise. Let's understand the exercise. What are we accomplishing? And here it says the Torah, which means the incense, had a spiritual dimension and served as a powerful antidote to the spiritual odor of evil. So in a way, and this is the way the Rebbe kind of bridged everything, saying Maimonides was using words which had a double entendre. He was saying that the incense brings a sweet smell to expel the negative odor of what was going on in the butchering in the temple. He said, but there was a deeper meaning to that. It expels the negative odor of our own negativity, of our own weakness, and it brings the sweetness our internal system of connectedness with God and connectedness with ourselves. And here's from the Rebbe. Of course, Maimonides didn't mean, and this is on page 184. 184, thank you. Maimonides didn't mean that removing a bad smell literally is the entire reason behind such a profound and elevated service. Clearly, even that explanation hints at something deeper. It was a double entendre. Perhaps this deeper meaning is what the Zohar describes. The incense is meant to remove the spiritual grime and impurity of the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara, again, meaning that our weaker side that grips us often of, wanting to feel resentment, jealousy, whatever it is, our unhealthy appetites. You'll notice that the ingredients used in the incense weren't fit for human consumption. The ingredients were all seemed like kind of expendable stuff. It's very different from animal offerings because without to come from animals that were edible, ideally the choicest, fattest one. So if someone was coming something that they value, that they could use, and they're giving it to God, that's great. In the Torah, they were taking something that they really had very little use for. But together, when they're burned, it produced a nice smell. This tells us something about the spiritual symbolism of the incense. Its ingredients represent things that come from a much lower level. It wasn't, each one individually, it wasn't useful. Even more than that, among its spices was one which was called chelbana, which had a bad smell. But that was, when it was combined with the other 10, it was part of it added a positive pungency. What does that represent? Something from even the lower place. You needed something negative as part of it because the negative together with the positive, it transforms. And yet, when all of it was burned together for God in a way that produced a pleasing fragrance of God, even those lowly things were uplifted and transformed into holiness. So here is an idea that, and this is where we're going to be going. Ideally, think about this in terms of human relationships, and then we'll get to God. In a human relationship, so get along. Two people get along. They're friends. They go to shows together. Whatever it may be. Maybe even spouses. Maybe they stand under chuppah and they commit to each other. Beautiful. Now something happens. Inevitably, somebody makes a mistake somewhere, right? Usually the husband. So they're screwed up, right? Something happened. So there are different ways of dealing with it. There's a way of dealing with it in trying to figure out how not to, to try to quell the negative repercussions of a mistake. Say, sorry, here, flowers, whatever it may be, to try just to let's get past this. Or you can look at it and say, okay, the one who made the mistake, say, how did I get into that spot? Why did I make the mistake? How was I seeing myself? How was I seeing the other? What didn't I understand? How can I learn from it? And therefore, the mistake becomes a very important lesson for the future. So it's not just erasing a negative kind of and burying a hatchet so we can try to get along now today like we did 3 days ago before I made the mistake. Hopefully it strengthens the relationship because now we're getting back on the horse in a much more insightful way. See, now I understand me better. Now I understand us better. Now I can, and what propels me to go through this exercise of introspection, which is sometimes like, I don't have the time for introspection. I just I got too much work to do and too many bills to pay. No, when I see the relationship as so important as a priority, say, I'm going to fight for this relationship and try to figure out what I'm not seeing or what makes it work, what makes God keeps it strong. So it takes out a deeper level of our commitment. And if we apply ourselves to that, what we're doing is we're shouting that this relationship is important to me, is a priority, or the priority to me. And then we grow from the mistakes. This is kind of a message of the Ketoret, and we're going to get more into it. But just to start with what he just said, you're taking kind of throw away parts of the personality, right? Things that don't have use, and even negative. The chelbon of that piece, I think it's called galbanum in English. I don't know, but the chelbon, if you just brought it into the room, it would not smell good. It would bring a bad odor to the room. There's a part of us that if you put it out on the table, doesn't smell good for others. Everybody's got their shtick. But this was brought together and presented to God. So we're trying to make even our weaker parts and saying how we learn from them, how we grow from them, and therefore, when we grow from our mistakes, when we grow from trying to recalibrate and refine even our weaker parts, that makes for an even stronger relationship. And that's very much what Yom Kippur is about. The relationship between us and God, but it's not just between us and God, it's between us and loved ones and others. So the question was, why is the Torah such an essential part of Yom Kippur, a day meant to free of all sins? So now they ask a question. We're going to go back to what I just said. You think about Yom Kippur, we dress in white. It's like that's where we're not eating. We're like focused on God. You're fasting. You're spending. It's a day devoted to spirituality and our own goodness. There's one day out of the year we don't sin. It's Yom Kippur, because who has time to sin? We don't have much opportunity. So, but we're not trying to marinate in sin. We're trying to use it as a day of growth. But first, on the question, it says in text 8 on page 185, says the Talmud tells us Yom Kippur, the Satan has no permission to prosecute. In other words, there's nothing in the spirit of Yom Kippur. There's nothing to accuse us of. Well, I'm busy fasting. I dedicated the day. It's a Thursday. It's a work day. I should be out there doing things. But I'm gonna be in Shul on Yom Kippur because it's so important to me. There it says again in the concept of the Satan. In other words, the idea that there are things where we do things wrong and our own lives accuse us, present an accusation. I did this. I did that. Yom Kippur, the Talmud says that doesn't stand much. Why? Because on that day, Jewish people fast and return to God in teshuvah. In return, they're clean of sin, and therefore God does not listen to the Satan's accusations. There's not much to say. That's Yom Kippur fundamentally. Yet we focus on sin. Why? We're not focusing on sin. We're focusing on our own growth from our weaknesses, and that is through what we call teshuvah. Teshuvah literally means return. But what are we doing? What are we returning to our best selves? Because even if we never actually lived our best selves, that's who we are. It's not new. It's where we're discovering a part of us that we haven't been living. So there are two types of teshuvah. Teshuvah that comes from fear that focuses on fixing the mistake, and teshuvah from love that turns the mistake into something positive. Over Rosh Hashanah, I was actually speaking with someone, and we're sitting for a while, and he said that I'm not sure how this is supposed to work. He said, I apologize for things to God. And then, a short time later, it happens all over again. So I said, you apologize to God. Why are you apologizing to God? Because I did something wrong. So I said, and therefore? I said, God knows, I don't want it. I don't want to suffer for it. So I said, okay, but that sounds kind of transactional. It's your teacher in 5th grade said, you do this, there's a consequence. You did it. So you said, sorry, teacher, because I don't want to have to lose any recess or something like that, or get points off. Why would seeing God that way is really seeing in a very minimalistic way. So what about a loved one? And it's not about, of course, you did something wrong, apologize for it, but it's not about that you didn't do this when you should have done that. That's just a detail. We have a relationship. I'm supposed to honor that relationship because I value that relationship. I want to honor that relationship. I don't want to tamper or damage the relationship. And I did something, which means I didn't honor the relationship. I caused turbulence. So what I'm worried about is the relationship, not this thing I did, that thing I did, an outgrowth of me not honoring the relationships. I did that, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm not just sorry about that. What I want to do is I wanted to get back into a groove with you because I know I messed up on the relationship. That's not about a fear or oops, I got to take care of that. I spilled that. I got to clean it up. It's we have a relationship, and I care, and it's meaningful to me, and it hurts me that I didn't that I showed a dishonor to the relationship. So I want to carry it further. That's what they're calling a tissue from love. That you care. It's because you care, not because oh I did that. Now I got to duck. Text 9. The Talmud says Rabbi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Bar Chanina raised the contradiction between two verses. In one verse, it says, return you backsliding children. Now, Jeremiah is talking to adults, too. Probably more than to children, if you call children those lower than bar and bas mitzvah. But the idea was you were immature. If someone is spiritually immature or whatever, psychologically immature, so then you say it's what you have to lower your expectations. So if they did something wrong, it frames it in a more somewhat forgivable way. Say now that you've hopefully you're growing up, you're going to grow past this mishagas, implying that initially when you sinned, it was only because you were backsliding, and you're because you were immature children. But it also says, "I will hear you backsliding." It has nothing to do with being children. You're fundamentally you're making mistakes. So how does God see us? As being better than these mistakes and just showing immaturity, or as really having mistakes that we seriously got to check, figure out what to do with them. So he says it's really not a contradiction. One speaks of teshuvah motivated by love, while the other is motivated by fear. One who does teshuvah out of love expunges the sin from their record entirely. There can be a sense of what I really didn't know, and based on my upbringing, I had no idea that this very special person had a certain sensitivity. So I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Now I know how you feel. Now I understand. I didn't get it. And therefore, for the road ahead, I'm committed to because now I know. I just didn't know. So there was nothing personal. It's not like it messed up. I just didn't know. It's different than me doing something that I should have known better. Now, but there also, I say, oh, I can't believe it. I'm gonna try to figure out. Or I say, I'm so sorry. Can we forget about this and move on? And I'll bring you chocolates. And now that might work, but I didn't make it. I didn't undo anything. I buried a hatchet, and everybody remembers exactly where it's buried. So it's probably gonna crop up again. Reish Lakish, a rabbi of the Talmud says, "Great is teshuvah, the power of return, as the penitent's intentional sins are counted for him or her as unwitting transgressions. Through teshuvah, we say to God, I just didn't know. I'm sorry, and I wasn't in the right place. I didn't understand it, and especially when it comes to Jewish law, there's so much that people don't know. They don't mean to be doing anything defiant. So recalibrating our thought and expressing a level of regret and commitment for the future is putting it was a mistake. Then the Talmud asks, is that really so? Didn't Rish Lakish himself say, greatest teshuvah as one's intentional sins are counted for him as merits? Rish Lakish went even further. He said a transgression is actually like a mitzvah after teshuvah. It doesn't just take the bite out of it. It becomes like a mitzvah. So what's the difference? Does it become like an unintentional, or does it become like a mitzvah? So he says, Both. Depends on what kind of tshuva you do. This is not a problem. One speaks of teshuva motivated by love, the other is motivated by fear. When we look at something that we've done and say, this I unwittingly or unconsciously or stupidly damage my relationship, and I'm going to use this mistake as an exercise to find a deeper level of relationship and honor the relationship. And because it's about the relationship, then it becomes like a mitzvah. Why? Because, in other words, it becomes a force for good, propelling me closer. Or the other one is saying, oh, I didn't know really, and I'll forgive you, but you did what you did. And it's not making you, you're not using that to make a better person. You found a good, a correct excuse. And here's a graphic that says tshuva from fear is driven by guilt or fear of punishment, focused on fixing mistakes and avoiding consequences. And teshuva, what we're calling from love, and love meaning that it's about the sense of connectedness, is driven by longing and love, focused on reconnecting, coming closer to God. So now we're going to take a look at this a little bit, the same angle, but crystallize it a little differently, slightly differently. On the day-to-day practical level, teshuva is repentance, a response to wrongdoing, a healing potion for the ills of the soul. But teshuva of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, is more than the rectification of sin. The word teshuva means return to pristine beginnings, return to intrinsic perfection of the soul. For the essence of the soul of man, which is a spark of godliness, according to the book of Tanya, the foundational book of Chabad, is immune to corruption. The inner self of man remains uninvolved in the follies of the ego, untouched by the outer self's enmeshment and material and mundane. We have a better self, which is better than all this. If I visit someone in prison and is accused and was convicted of doing something terrible, that may be very true, but I know that there's a better person inside there. I want to be able to touch that person, try to bring that out. Not that they don't deserve to be in jail necessarily, but we're not defined by our worst selves. We're multi-layered, we're complex. Teshuva is the return to one's true self, the cutting through all of those layers, outer layers of misguided actions and distorted priorities to awaken one's true will and desire. And here in the graphic, teshuva is about returning to our true self that's entirely aligned with God. This is from a great rabbi of the 1500s, the Maharal of Prague, who made famous by the Golem. Know that, his creation of the Golem, know that teshuva, return, it's a return to God, but it's for the person. It's just returning to ourselves. All people were originally created without sin. And when we return to God, we're returning to our original state. It's it's about God, but it's an internal exercise of our own, finding our best selves. And that was the Torah. The Torah and Yom Kippur, the incense, represents teshuva from love, which has the power to not only repair what was lost, but also to create something greater than before. To teshuva, the rising of the smoke, symbolized our rising to reach a better part of ourselves. This explains, text 12, how teshuva achieves 188. Atonement for past sins. Teshuva enables the sinner to reconnect with his own inherent goodness, with that part of himself which is never sinned in the first place. In a sense, he has now acquired a new self, one with an unblemished past. But this new self is really his own true self coming to light, while his previous corrupted self was but an external distortion of his true being. Only teshuva has such power over the past. Only teshuva can undo a negative deed. But this is only one of the uses of the power of return. Teshuva is not only for sinners, but also for the holiest person in the holiest time in the holiest place. For even the perfectly righteous individual needs to be liberated from the limitations of the past. So teshuva is undoing a negative deed, but really it's about us reconnecting. So in the language of Torah thought, even righteous people do teshuva. What does doing teshuva mean? Doing teshuva means connecting, reconnecting. What happens if two people have a relationship that's fine. There's no trouble there. They're not going for therapy. It's great, but they're both busy in different ways. And then they come home and their minds are in different places because that's human. That's normal. And they say, you know something? I haven't seen you for 10 hours. Let's sit down and reconnect. That's teshuvah. It's remembering, saying, this is an important value to me, but I get distracted. Even the perfectly righteous, they're living in a human world. And we say they also have to do teshuvah. Every time they pray, every time they zero in on the relationship with God, that's teshuvah. It's not saying I did something wrong. It's that I was thinking about something else, and now I'm thinking about the beauty of our relationship. It's because it's so important to me, and it's reverting to myself, to where I want to be. Even though I all the things I did today were really important and I don't regret doing them, when I'm coming home, I'm saying, now this is my priority. So on Yom Kippur, the Ketoret did more than just undo the negative. It transformed or caused distance into fuel for a closeness. Distance can bring closeness, paradoxically, because feeling that it's like absence makes the heart grow fonder. When we miss someone, we don't take them, we take them less for granted, and we appreciate more what they bring to our lives. So when we've had a distance, it should drive us even more to find the closeness and keep the closeness, represented by smoke that can only rise up. And here from the Rebbe in text 13 on page 189. With this in mind, we can understand why the inclusion of the smoke-raising ingredient, which is called mala oshan. Mala oshan literally means raising smoke. It was an ingredient that caused smoke. Was such a critical requirement in incense service, specifically in Yom Kippur. Again, it didn't have to smoke on your average Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yom Kippur, it had to smoke. Why? Yom Kippur is a day that lifts us, like the smoke rises beyond the regular spiritual system. The day itself carries us to a place that transcends limitation, measurement, and spiritual hierarchy, a place where new reality begin. That's why in the Yom Kippur service, as we're going to hear on Yom Kippur morning in the Torah reading, God says, I will be found within the smoke, because in the smoke represents your personality rising above its normal place. That's why the Mal Oshan, the raising of the smoke, was essential, as it symbolized exactly what Yom Kippur is about, lifting everything upward to a higher realm. During the rest of the year, the incense served a different purpose. It was primarily about removing spiritual grime, the throwaways of our personality. So if the smoke didn't rise perfectly, it didn't disqualify the offering. But Yom Kippur, it's about us rising. And that was critical to without that, it wasn't proper service. Let's look at key points. It's a mitzvah to offer incense in the temple on Yom Kippur, and specifically to make sure it raises a tall cloud of smoke. Number two, the commentaries offer two different reasons for the incense: as an antidote to the foul smell of sacrifices, or as a powerful spiritual aroma to please God. Number three, Hasidic thought reconciles the two. The powerful spiritual nature of the incense was potent enough to combat the spiritual stench of sin. Number four, there are two types of love, one motivated by fear and the other by love. No, there are two types of repentance, of teshuvah. One motivated, that's a mistake. One motivated by fear and the other by love. The former is performed throughout the year, and the latter we experience on Yom Kippur. And finally, number five, the incense offered throughout the year differed in its spiritual profile from the incense offered in Yom Kippur along the same fault lines. So that, if there are any questions, we can address that. If not, I wish you all a meaningful Yom Kippur, easy fast, and a wonderful and sweet and healthy and safe New Year.
So only one single question: why we don't use honey in the ingredients for the?
For the offerings?
Yeah.
Because the sweetness, they didn't smell good because of
Because the recipe is destroyed.
Yeah.
But you can have it in Yom Kippur, in Rosh Hashanah,
Yeah, right.
enjoy the honey.
What? Good week, everyone.